Wow, that is the Annunciation to the Shepherds, one of my favorite pieces of music from my Pessebre, sung by my grandmother, Olga Iglesias, who also happens to be the namesake to the Olga Iglesias Project. Composed by Pablo Casals, he was also a cellist and a conductor, but many would not also consider him to be a peace crusader, and El Pessebre was his magnum opus dedicated to a plea for peace on earth. But what exactly did it mean to the maestro, and what is El Pessebre all about? My name's Anthony Cheney, and I'm the director and curator here at the Olga Iglesias Project, where we raise awareness regarding Puerto Rico's mid-20th century classical music heritage. Like Olga Iglesias, there are so many musicians at that time that were taking part in the cultural movement of classical music taking root on the island in the mid-20th century. And upon Casals' arrival in 1955, it just further elevates their efforts to an international stage. So join me here at the Olga Iglesias Project as we examine this period in Puerto Rico's history through the lens of programs, footage, and so much more of the items left behind in our collection. But before we continue, let's listen to Maureen Forrester as she sings The Voice of the Lady That Spins. You wouldn't necessarily be wrong in thinking that El Pessebre is just another Christmas nativity story, because it does clearly depict the birth of the Christ child. But I'm here to tell you that it's way more than just your typical oratorio dealing with sacred or religious matters. But before we dive into that, here is a bit of some background. The Catalan text used for the music of El Pessebre is actually a long poem written by Casals' compatriot and friend Joan Alavedra, a Catalan writer and journalist of the day. In 1943, after Casals came to read Alavedra's poem in the newspaper, Casals became quite moved by the poem that he decided to set it to music, making sure to capture the rejoicing of the poem's characters over the birth of the Christ child, but also their agony in knowing the inevitable tragedy of his future sacrifice. No nativity story would be complete without the voices of shepherds, fishermen, angels, and adoring livestock like the mule, the ox, and the camel. The poem and also the music alike are steeped in Catalan culture and tradition. So much so, there are even references in the text to the Catalan folkloric dance known as the sardana, and Casals even approximated the sounds of the oboes to that of the Catalan folkloric instrument known as the gralla, which you can appreciate here. Casals was composing at Pessebre under the bleak reality of World War II in southwestern France in a town known as Prades, which is also a part of what is historically known as Catalonia. During this time in history, of course, Germany was occupying France, and Casals was experiencing and witnessing the horrors of his fellow countrymen fleeing Catalonia, specifically the Franco regime. Under these conditions, El Pessebre was being composed, and Casals was hoping that by the end of the war he would be able to debut his magnum opus in Barcelona. However, of course, history did not play out that way, and Casals put his Pessebre away for a number of years. It wasn't until about the mid-1950s in which Casals then took out the Pessebre to complete due to the fact that he was invited by the United Nations to perform a plea for peace. So finally, he asked his good friend Joan Alavedra to write a fourth part to the poem, in which then Casals completed his Pessebre and debuted it in 1960 in the seaside town of Acapulco, Mexico. Casals performed at Pessebre as a plea and gesture for peace on earth. He used his art and celebrity status of more than 70 years to make an international statement through the vehicle of his music. At the age of 85, through El Pessebre, Casals was promoting peace through the timeless themes of fraternity and goodwill found in the music of his magnum opus.
Music, this marvelous universal language, understood by everyone, everywhere, ought to be a source of better communication among men. This is why I make a special appeal to my fellow musicians everywhere, asking each one to put the purity of his art at the service of mankind for the peace that we all desire and wait for.
Casals was performing at Pessebre up until his death in 1973 at the age of 96 throughout many locations in Europe and the Americas, and made multiple appearances at the United Nations. He went on tour to such places like Venezuela, France, the United Kingdom, Argentina, and many more. He met with many political leaders of his time, like U Thant, the Secretary General of the United Nations, John F. Kennedy, and the Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize twice and was awarded numerous accolades like the Medal of Freedom and the UN Peace Medal. Casals was shrewd enough not to perform in countries that did not align with his values. And on top of that, even in those places that he did perform, he did have certain conditions dealing with the actual programs of the Pessebre performances. In each program, he would include a peace message that would have to be translated to the language of the home country, and even the lyrics to the actual oratorio of El Pessebre that were also found in the program had to be translated as well. So you see, for Casals, it was more than just an oratorio dealing with sacred or religious matters. El Pessebre was a plea for peace on earth, and he used his baton to spread that message. So to conclude, let's watch Casals conduct La Gloria, which is the finale to his El Pessebre from 1972, as he wishes for peace on earth to men of goodwill.